Hello and welcome to a new episode of Berlin's 96 Localities. I am today in the southeast in Bohnsdorf. It's one of those localities where I hadn't been before yet, so I think this might be an interesting tour for both you and me. Before we go into detail, let's take a look at the map first.
Bohnsdorf is in the southeast of Berlin and approximately 20 kilometers away from Berlin's central station. It belongs to the district of Treptow-Köpenick and has got a population of around 12,000. The shape of the locality is a bit like a triangle, the sides being more or less identical to railway tracks. The Autobahn 117 splits the locality pretty much in two parts, with residential areas to the east and commercial grounds to the west. The picture becomes clearer if we zoom out a bit. You can see now that while there is some beautiful nature nearby, Bohnsdorf is also very close to Berlin's airport BER International.
Of course, I did a little bit of research before I came here. So nearby there is a small hill. That's the first point of interest for today. It's called the Falkenberg or Bunzelberg. Then there are some houses, some architecture from the early 20th century, similar to the ones that we've seen in Reinickendorf maybe. And last but not least, the Dorfanger, so the historic core located right next to the Autobahn, to the motorway, that might be a cross contrast. So I think these are three good points of interest for today.
So I started my walk up to the top of the Bunzelberg. As the terrain of Berlin and its environment is pretty flat, every little hill is welcome as it often offers you a really good view. My walk to the peak took about 15 minutes.
So I don't want to say climbed, I walked up this little hill of about 50 meters. So depending on your perspective, you could say, well, it's not even a hill, but you actually have a nice view from up here. I take some photos for you guys. But as it's quite windy here, I will soon continue my tour and go for the next point of interest.
The walk downwards was pretty nice, as it was quiet and I could enjoy a little park with the right mix of wild and man-made structures. I then passed by a completely new neighborhood with mini houses and mini gardens and some older houses before I reached the Gartenstadt Falkenberg, also known as Tuschkastensiedlung.
I have reached a small road called Akazienhof. It's actually a dead end. And here is this Siedlung that I mentioned in the beginning of the Berliner Moderne, so architecture from around 100 years ago. And I will translate this information provided here at this table, and I will add a few impressions of what I've seen so far.
According to the poster, 6 estates of the Berliner Moderne, the Gartenstadt Falkenberg being one of them, were built in the 1920s. They are part of UNESCO's World Heritage since 2008. These estates are a symbol of social progress in the 1920s, with new architecture and a new solidary society as a reaction to the terrible living and housing conditions during the German Empire and the lack of apartments after World War I. What is remarkable of the Gartenstadt Falkenberg are the colorful houses. This is why it got the nickname Tuschkastensiedlung, paintbox estate. From the main road, you can easily miss the estate as large modern blocks cover the historic buildings. An info point provides some details on the UNESCO World Heritage, similar to the points in other parts of the city. Unfortunately, this one's best days are over. What I really appreciated, though, was the small three-dimensional map of the estate that is probably very helpful for blind people. The houses itself are just lovely. I cannot say anything about the interior, but the outsides are delicate in my opinion, almost looking like your favorite little town built from bricks. I was super delighted, especially when the sun came out to provide me some great conditions for a few photos. I then continued my tour with the bus. After a couple of stops, I arrived at the Dorfanger.
Once in a while you need to take a little break, and I'm sitting here in front of the Dorfkirche. So I made it to the Dorfanger, the historic core of the village, and the weather is going back and forth all the time. But I will use this break and then I will go and check out the church.
The church is in a really good state. Unfortunately, the door was locked, so I couldn't take a look inside. Next to it was a column that was probably erected in honor of people died during the wars. In the background you can see the bridge that belongs to the Autobahn 117. Surprisingly, I didn't hear much of traffic from the motorway. Despite the Anger and a small pond, the area isn't too quiet anyway. Cars are constantly passing by. Personally, I think the atmosphere was a bit grim. Traces of decay and the closed-down restaurant played its role. Proceeding on Grünbergallee, a road that begins at the Dorfanger, I saw a couple of new houses. Some of them identical, some with weird fences. A few were quite old and a few yet to be built. Another restaurant looked pretty appealing, especially regarding the worsening weather conditions, but it was not yet open on that day. Therefore, I decided to finish my tour at the nearby S-Bahnhof Grünbergallee a few minutes later.
I have reached the end of Grünbergallee and I have also reached the end of this tour. The weather is not so great and this is why I call it a day here. Behind me you can see that a Gewerbegebiet is also a big part of Bohnsdorf. So I have focused today mainly on the living area and the historic core. I hope you enjoyed this tour and I hope to see you soon again on another one. Take care guys, cheers!